Okay, so it should be good now. Okay. There we go. Hey, Phil, do the students know there if everyone who is going to be there is there right now?
They don't know, but they do know the soccer team is out, and that was a big chunk of the class here.
Right. Yeah.
Right now I have about 7 students here.
Okay. Okay.
I have exactly 7 students. It's not about.
Okay, I'm still waiting on 2 students, but we'll get started in like a minute or 2.
Okay.
Well, we're missing 2 students here, and I know there's a bunch on quarantine in Jefferson City, but we'll get started, and if any more students come, we'll be okay with that. So hopefully everyone had a good week last week and enjoyed your Labor Day weekend. Hopefully it was a relaxing weekend, but it's good to see you all again. And I know on campus we have a lot of quarantine going on, self-quarantine, a lot of things happening, but we're gonna keep going. We're gonna keep pushing through, and if for any reason you have any symptoms or feel any sort of health issues that you feel could be coronavirus or something similar, please stay away. Please don't get everyone else sick. That might be why we have a few students out here as well. But again, if you feel any sort of sickness or illness at all, or if you know that you've been around people that have had it, please let me know. We are recording tonight, so I will post this on Canvas and we will work through that. But we just want to all stay healthy and safe right now. I already took the class roster. I know who is on quarantine there, and I can see who else is there. So I think we're good. I think everyone's accounted for, is either here or I already know is on quarantine. So that looks good. Did anyone have any issues with last week? I know the PowerPoints I loaded up the Friday before last week, and then the assignments, any issues turning those in? The case studies would have been due last night, so if you did not get those done, please do so as soon as possible. You'll have a grade reduction, but the drop boxes are still open if you need to do that. And hopefully with the discussion boards as well, there were no issues with that. The other thing, I can't remember who asked for it, but someone had asked for a mock or a final leadership paper example. And so I've posted that to Canvas. If you haven't had a chance to get on Canvas, I think I posted it right under the syllabus. So you can take a look at that. Please don't totally copy that, but that will give you a good idea of what I'm looking for. If you have any questions about that, and once again, if you want to turn in a rough draft of your leadership paper before the last week, feel free to do so, and I'll take a look at it and let you know if it looks good or bad. Also, if you just want me to take a look at the 2 studies that you chose or the 2 theories that you chose to see if, those would be good to compare and contrast. And if you'd be able to find a lot of sources, I'd be willing to do that too. So feel free to do that as well. Tonight marks almost the exact halfway point of this course. We've had 3 weeks prior to tonight. We have 3 weeks after this week. So we've got tonight and then 3 more Mondays after this. So this really is the halfway point. So make sure that you're focusing on that leadership paper. The final exam will be for the final week. So just keep that in mind as well. And I'll talk more about that in the coming weeks. But again, there is a written final exam, which will be on Canvas. We will not be doing it in class, but it will be posted on Canvas. And you'll have that last week to finish that. And also just a reminder, again, it's in your syllabus, but week 7, the last week of this course ends on Friday. So you can see there the weekly schedule on page 3 of the syllabus. Friday, October 9th is the last day of the semester. So if you're planning on completing your leadership paper, don't wait till the normal Sunday for that last week. The last day is Friday, October 9th. Are there any questions on any of those things? Okay, well, great. I want to start today. I think chapters 3 and 4 are important, especially for your final paper when it comes to leadership theories and comparing and contrasting things. So I know it's been about a week or so since we looked at chapters 3 and 4 and since you turned those in, but I wanted to look at the 2 case studies and kind of hear some of your ideas and what you thought about these. So let me remind you about chapter 3. I won't read the whole case study, but I will ask for feedback on what your answers were for the case study. So first of all, there's a man by the name of Alan Block, and he's responsible for implementing a new customer relationship management software in his company. This company, it provides exercise equipment to high schools, rec centers, small and mid-sized businesses, have about 310 salespeople in the workforce there. He's on an airplane flight and he's looking at and reviewing his Los Angeles and his Chicago departments. He looks at the Los Angeles department and sees everything they're getting done. They're on top of things. They don't whine. They don't complain. But when he looks at Chicago, he sees a lot of problems there. That members are bickering. They're avoiding one another. One of the members decided that she would rather go to a different position that made less money because she wanted a better quality of life. And so he's trying to decipher between all these things, and he's trying to figure out how he can turn Chicago around. So how would you characterize Block's leadership approach? It's obviously task versus people in this situation. So looking back at your answers, what did you put for that? Task-oriented? Yeah, very task-oriented. So the second part of that is, what approach do you think is correct for this situation?
oriented was probably best with the strict deadline and trying to meet on a short timetable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. There was a short timetable. It said that there was a scheduled 10-week completion deadline for the new CRM software, which does mean that you would have to be more task-oriented with a deadline. I don't know how complicated it was to implement the CRM, but depending on how much time it would take, it would seem like you may not have as much time to really focus on people's feelings, or like this one lady said, the quality of life. Sometimes when deadlines are that short, you kind of have to push through a little bit. So I think that's true. Any other thoughts on this?
Trouble with task oriented, and I think that's probably the right way too, but I don't think he's the right one to do it. Clearly, because he's not aware. First of all, he wasn't aware that there was a problem, and there's a huge problem.
Yeah.
Secondly, he really doesn't have a plan, or else he would have been doing that plan. So
yeah,
task oriented, he's been going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Alan Block, I don't think if you asked him what task-oriented and people-oriented means, I don't know if he'd even know what those two things mean. And it's obvious when he's talking about this one lady who decided to take a different job because she wanted a better quality of life. It doesn't seem like he understands at all what she's talking about, which is very odd, but I think you're right that he may not be the right person to implement this CRM software. So I would agree with that. Okay, so now you've got all these issues going on. Chicago's a mess. The team members are unenthusiastic. Again, stress is very high. So what do you do now if you were Block? Yeah, boost morale is a big thing. Actually, tonight, chapter 8, one of the big things we'll talk about is motivation. So that's definitely something that he could work on, is morale boosting somehow. But again, it doesn't seem like he has any idea how to do that. But that's definitely something he needs to do. Anything else? Oh, I don't want this computer to restart. Hold on just a second. Okay, takes care of that. Okay. Okay, the last question. So how would you suggest that Block modify his leadership style if he wants to succeed Mansell in 2 years? So Mansell is the one that's directly above him, who's the one that scheduled this 10-week implementation. So if Block wants to take over that position in 2 years, what would you suggest he do with his leadership style?
Just modify it and have more variation to it. Not everyone responds to the same type of leadership. Okay, yeah, have various different ways in which he works with different people. He obviously messed up a lot with the lady Sally, who left the position. He also made a list of other members: Barry, Max, Bob, Lynn, and Sally, and all of these names seem to me like they're just names to him, and he doesn't really get them other than the output that they give to him. But as far as understanding who they are as individuals, he has no idea. So yeah, I would agree that he needs to modify his leadership style to an understanding of who each of those people are. And it says they have 310 salespeople nationwide. Obviously, it's going to be impossible to know all of those, but the leaders of those salespeople, or the ones who are in charge, he probably needs to get to know and how best to lead them individually. So yeah, he's got some work to do there. Anything else he needs to do with his leadership style?
I think he needs to be more self-aware, which the book talks about self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, he didn't even know that stuff was a problem.
Yeah.
So what is he not paying attention to that he should be paying attention to?
Yeah, he is not very self-aware. He writes, I think at the very beginning, he writes down 3 times on his paper, what's wrong with the team, what's wrong with the team, what's wrong with the team, when in reality, it's probably what's wrong with him. And all his focus is on everybody else. And that's throughout this whole discussion, or this whole case study, he never really looks at himself to determine, am I doing what I'm supposed to do? It's all about, is everyone else, what's wrong with everybody else? So I would agree with that. Yeah, he needs to kind of turn around the mirror and look at himself a little bit. Okay?
I would agree if he keeps going to be in that leadership role.
Yeah. I don't think, it doesn't sound like that leadership role is going to be something that works out for him, unless he is able to turn things around quickly, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Okay, let's move on to chapter 4. This one was more of a discussion. It was about a nice manager, and I'm sure all of you have had either managers or coaches or people in charge of you that have been categorized as nice. So this is a discussion that they're having where they're trying to figure out which candidate is going to be moved into a top position in an office in San Antonio. They've narrowed it down to 4 candidates. And the one they're discussing here is one by the name of Harry Creighton. I believe that's how you would say his last name. And everyone has very good things to say about Harry, that he's a great guy. He has great relationships with his employees. All his employees say that he's very nice. But Marcus, who is kind of in charge of this meeting, says, is nice what we're looking for here? And then he also asks, tell me, how does a manager achieve an across-the-board reputation as a nice guy? I've worked for and with a number of managers during my life. I respected them, thought many of them were fair and upfront in their treatment of us, thought some were jerks who should be canned. So you get the idea, or excuse me, that's Mitch, sorry, not Marcus. So Mitch is the one who kind of pushes back a little bit about, is nice what we're necessarily looking for? Or do we want someone who's capable of getting the job done, who knows the difference? Or there's a fine line there. It discusses that between being nice and getting things done. And do we want him to be someone who is able to separate those boundaries? So question number 1, so at the end they're like, okay, we're going to think about this Harry guy. He seems like a good candidate. He's got lots of potential, but do we really want someone who's nice in that position? So the first question is, what does nice mean to you? If you've worked for someone who you would categorize as that, or people you know in your life, how would you define nice in the business world?
Friendly, honest, and somebody you feel like they want to help you.
Okay. Yeah, friendly and honest and helpful. And it does sound like in this situation, this Harry guy has been kind of taken advantage of, though, that some people in the office, if they needed help with something, instead of maybe giving them the proper directions on how to do it, he would just step in and do it for them. And so in some situations, that's a good thing. In some, that's not a very good thing, that you need to be able to delegate and still not cross that line of where you're doing other people's work for them. But yeah, I would define helpful as something that is categorized as nice, for sure. Any other ways that you would define nice, or what it means to you?
Makes people comfortable.
Comfortable, yeah. Yeah, when someone is nice to you, you feel comfortable around them. So, and again, that's not necessarily a bad thing. That comfort in a job is very important. Okay? Okay, so the second part of this, and this is a very subjective question because I've seen nice play out in different ways, but the second part is, do you think nice is a good trait for leaders, or is it the kiss of death when it comes to leadership? What do you think about that?
I think it's a good thing.
Okay.
Thank you. And the slide talked about the quote
book saying something about kind but not weak. Basically, just can't be nice, can't be a pushover.
Yeah. There's a line there between being nice and a pushover. But I would agree with you that I think being nice is a good trait. And again, we'll look at that more tonight in the 2 chapters we're going to look at. But I would agree with that as well. But does anyone think it could be a kiss of death? And if so, why? Or has anyone worked for a nice boss and it turned out to kind of backfire on them?
I've worked for a nice boss who I also respected to the point where I thought if I wasn't contributing, I'd have to leave the organization. I would voluntarily leave the organization out of respect for him and what he had built. And so, super nice guy, absolutely created a business that he wanted to work for one day. He was successful. In 2019, he was recognized by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce as the small business of the year nationally.
Okay.
He was successful. But he was respected.
He would respect.
He was respected.
He was respected. He was nice and respected.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you read through this scenario where with the Harry guy, did any of Harry's attributes seem to match with him, or did you look at Harry in this situation as a pushover?
He was a little soft.
Yeah. I think so too. I think Harry was a little bit soft in this scenario. Yeah, I would agree with that. Okay, so I don't know if any of you had a chance to do Myers-Briggs. I know we looked at the big 5 personality dimensions. We looked at the left and right brain dominance last time, but is nice related to any of those concepts that we talked about from chapter 3? You would say, okay, introverted, extroverted, or compassionate, uncompassionate. Did anything seem to match up from any of those, or the big 5 personality dimensions that would play into being nice or not being nice?
How about agreeable?
Agreeableness?
Overly agreeable.
Yeah.
Not enforcing anything.
Yeah. Someone who is nice, at least based on this scenario, is probably more agreeable than non-agreeable. I would agree with that. Any of the others that come to mind?
Feelings, certainly.
Feelings? Do you think left brain or right brain plays into it at all? Or can you be nice on both sides of that, either being more analytical or more creative? Does that matter at all? Or can either side? Because obviously the optimal is that you have both of those, both left and right working together. But can a left brain or a right brain be nice just if they're in one of those categories? Or does one tend to be more nice than the other?
I don't think that left or right brain has anything to do with being nice.
Okay.
That's completely separate.
Okay, so you would leave the left and right brain discussion out of being nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Any of those other concepts that you would say relate to being nice? Okay, and then the last question is, if Harry is passed over for promotion, so if he's not the one of the 4 that is promoted, what feedback and advice would you give him about how to improve his leadership skills for possible future promotion? So I know we mentioned that he's a little bit of a pushover. So maybe in some of these ways, like I would recommend when people bring issues to him, let me see, let's see. So Wayne, about halfway down on the case study, says he'll give them slack when it comes to things like overlooking their weaknesses, a little sloppiness with deadlines, or taking time off. One thing I would suggest to Harry is that stop overlooking those things. You can point out people's weaknesses in a kind way. You can still be nice and still point out weaknesses of people. Sloppiness, you can still be nice and still point out where people are cutting corners. And then also taking time off. You can still be nice, but also tell people, hey, we need you here more, or the time off that you're taking is hurting our business overall. The other thing is that he's always willing to step in and help out, which again is very nice and very helpful. But if you do that too much, you're just going to be seen as a weak boss, and that people aren't going to respect you. They're just going to take advantage of you. So those are some of the things I would suggest to Harry. Anything else that you would add to that? Okay, let's move on to chapter 5. These are the chapters that we were not able to talk about in class, but hopefully you were able to go over them. Again, I won't read through this one, the case study, but this is the USS Florida. This was the submarine. I believe it was a submarine, correct? Yes, the nuclear submarine. Michael Alfonso just took charge of the submarine. Now, he's a guy that came in the Navy. He came up as a teenager. He moved through the ranks. He was seen kind of as a loner, but pleasant enough. He was very polite, but he kept mostly to himself. So when he took over, he became very critical of people on board, you know, talking down to them. At one point, he said, "You're disqualified," to someone who was having trouble with the periscope. You know, he became very focused on not just job performance, but also just tearing people apart when they made mistakes and downgrading them. There were a lot of issues. There was some rebellion. They watched movies that talked about mutinies and things like that, and kind of made fun of him, or kind of made underhanded comments that spoke to his type of leadership. So when they reached the home port, the sailors said that they were physically and mentally beat to the ground. They were despondent, and that Alfonso seemed dumbfounded by all of this. He pointed out that the USS Florida had the best ever grades assigned for certifications and inspections, and so he was confused about all of this. So analyze Alfonso's impact on the crew in terms of love versus fear. What played into that, or why did they fear him, or where did the love versus fear come into play? Or
the boss can't control his temper.
yeah.
Both for the, I think for the some very small cake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had a lot of trouble controlling his temper, and he also was very, just like you said, very small things he would just make huge issues out of. And it seemed to me like the sailors were more interested in doing things right just to keep him off their back than actually doing them right because they wanted to do them right, or for the betterment of the submarine as a whole. Okay, what might account for the fact that he behaved so strongly as captain of the USS Florida? What led to this kind of fear that he put into the sailors?
Might have had a power trip.
A power trip? Okay. Yeah, it doesn't talk anything about his, like, how he grew up, but being a loner, he may have always seen himself as someone who thought either he deserved to be in power, or this is his chance to prove how good he can be, since he always kind of was a man who kept mostly to himself. So it definitely could be a power trip, and he saw this as his first time to really shine in front of others. Okay, what else do you think accounts for the fact that he played so much into fear tactics with the crew?
The sailors began to fight against him.
Mm-hmm. So the sailors started to fight, so you think maybe that made him fight back more, sort of? I would understand that. I think that makes sense. Okay, so question number 2, I think this is probably the best of the 3 questions, but so put yourself in, I know it's probably very hard to put yourself in this position unless some of you have military experience, but if you are the leader on aboard a nuclear submarine, which matters more to you, high certification grades or high quality interpersonal relationships?
You gotta have both.
Have to have both, okay.
You have to. I mean, you're commanding one of the world's 18 nuclear powerhouses.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna be, you can't make a mistake.
Yeah, yeah.
But you've got to have every team member, all 150, 65
Mm-hmm.
members, knowing how to work together as a cohesive unit.
Okay.
So you have to have personal mastery. You have to understand the big picture.
Yeah.
And you have to have everyone's trust and communication so that they can execute without fail.
Yeah. Because I mean, in most businesses, it's not life or death, but it is here. That, and I'm surprised they let it last as long as they did. But when they got back to port, they dismissed him or fired him from the position. But how many would agree with that it takes both? More of one, more of the other? You would agree it takes both? Okay.
He only lasted for 11 months in that position.
11 months, which is that long in the military? I'm not sure.
After that command,
Okay.
He was on a short shakedown cruise. He got
Yeah.
out to Hawaii, and he was really.
He was, okay. So 11 months is not, I don't know military, how long things go, but so 11 months is not that long of a tenure. Okay.
I think based on what happened, it seems that the relationship piece is the bigger piece of it, right?
The relationship is a little bigger, at least in this scenario, or?
I would agree.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Okay.
he literally made the highest grades ever, it said.
Yep, highest grades ever.
When they relieved him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can't totally, obviously, if you're out there, you can't totally disregard performance, but.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that, though. The scary thing is, well, I don't know if it's scary or if it just means there's a lot of responsibility, is there are 192 nuclear warheads on board and 24 long-range missiles carrying 192 nuclear warheads. So you do have, I mean, I can understand Alfonso's focus on certifications and inspections, because that is a lot of responsibility to have on your shoulders. And in a way, I can't blame him, because I might get drawn into that as well when I know that I could, I could destroy large portions of the earth just with what's on board my ship. And that might make me very nervous to focus more on high certification grades. But he sure didn't show the sailors the respect or the relationships that they needed in this scenario. So if you were Admiral Sullivan, do you agree with Admiral Sullivan's decision to fire Alfonso, and why or why not?
I don't think it's a correct decision to fire him
Okay.
immediately. I think it's the big boss responsibility to coach his subordinate.
Okay.
I think the big boss should tell Alfonso.
Alfonso.
Yeah, how to improve.
So you would go more for a coach Alfonso to do better than just outright fire him?
Yes.
Okay.
Everybody has his own leadership style.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows it's a bad leadership style? Because the performance is good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. I would agree. And it seems like in this scenario, the problem is very clear what the issue is. In a lot of scenarios, there's a lot of factors, but it seems like the crew knows exactly what the issue is, that he doesn't have good relationship style, and he acts out of fear. And it seems like whoever is above Alfonso realizes that that's the issue too. So I can see your point of view that maybe coaching or giving him some analysis on his leadership would be better in that scenario. Yeah.
I think it depends on the organization whether to fire him or not.
Yeah.
In this instance, you're dealing with life and death.
Right.
And a lot of firepower. So I think the room for error is a lot smaller than being, say,
yeah,
a general management job.
Yeah.
So I would have got rid of him.
You would have gotten rid of him. I think the thing that you would want to know if you got rid of him is exactly who's going to step into that position right away. Because I do agree it's, you know, you've got to make split seconds decisions, and that's type of, if you're going to fire someone, you better know who is next in line to take that over and have a good detailed plan of how that's going to happen. But
In this situation, he's already lost the crew at this point. Right?
he has lost the crew. They're gone. Yeah.
Even if you go through coaching, he's already lost them, and they're not going to be interested in
Yeah.
their opinions, and it's going to be a bad situation.
Yeah. And like I said, I've never been in the military. I don't know how it works, but it must be that once you've lost the respect of your men, is it impossible to get back? Maybe it is. I don't know. I'm not sure how that plays out. But if that is the case, that you've lost your men in this situation, once you've lost them, there's no going back. That might play into it as well. That there's no turning back to regain, or not enough time to regain the respect from the crew members. So that probably plays into it too. Okay, looking at the level of emotional intelligence, where do you think Commander Alfonso was when it came to emotional intelligence, and what advice would you give him on how to improve that?
He lacked in every area.
Yeah, he did. He lacked in every area of emotional intelligence. I would agree with that. Which is really unfortunate, because he was someone who could, meet the grade when it came to inspections and qualifications and certifications. So he had that part of it down. Like, that's the kind of guy you want. But when it came to emotional intelligence, and probably part of that plays back into when he joined as a teenager. He was a loner. He kept to himself. So it doesn't sound like he ever really tried to become emotionally intelligent, or that was something that was never part of his background. Any other advice you would give him on how to build that emotional intelligence? Okay, and they don't ask this question in the book, but it sounds like Admiral Sullivan was probably the one that hired him in the first place, or put him in that position. It says that he was the one who made the final decision to fire him. So, what do you think it was a mistake to hire him in the first place, or why do you think he was given that opportunity? Because it seems to me like if he was showing these types of things where he was a loner, kept to himself, then you would think that whoever put him in charge would have seen that at the very beginning, or he was liked. Mm-hmm.
And he had the respect of the crew at the start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he did have that. So do you think, were there any warning signs then? Like, to me, it looks like, yeah, those things are true, but there are a couple red flags that maybe Admiral Sullivan overlooked at the beginning. I know it's impossible to tell until someone's in a leadership position how they're going to react. But it would be interesting to see what kind of leader they put in place once they got rid of Alfonso. If they went with someone who, well, because Alfonso was so low in emotional intelligence and had no interpersonal relationship skills? Did they go with someone who was really high in that, and then they started falling behind when it came to certifications and inspections? Because sometimes in leadership roles, if you've got someone who's very strong in some way but fails in another way, usually the next leader is like vice versa. And so it would be interesting to see what the next leader or the captain of the crew would look like in this scenario. Okay, looking finally at chapter 6. So this one you had to rank the characters in the story. There were a boy and a girl who were in love. The boy was going to leave an island on a long journey, and he was going to be gone for a long time. So the girl felt like she needed to go to his island to see him one last time before he went away. So she went to the ferry boat captain. The ferry boat captain said, "You need to stay with me for a night in order for me to take you across the other island." The girl didn't have any money, so she went to a hermit. The hermit said, "I cannot tell you what to do. You must weigh the alternatives and the sacrifices that are involved and come to a decision within your own heart." So she did spend the night with the ferry boat captain. He took her across, but as soon as the boy found out that that's what she had done, he basically dumped her. He said, "That's the end. Go away from me." So she needed to get back to the original island, her island. So she went to a second hermit. He begged for the money for her to go back across to her first island. She went and got the money from the hermit. He said, "You owe me nothing. We owe this to each other. I am only too happy to be of help." And the girl returned back to her own island. So looking at the 5 characters here, you've got the boy, the girl, the ferry boat captain, the first hermit, and then the second hermit. How would you rank those in order of the ones you liked from the most to the least? Which of those 5 characters stood out as the one you liked the most? The second hermit you'd put number 1? Okay, why is that? What values governed your choice on that? He helps others without asking for anything in return. Yeah. Okay. How many of you would agree with the second hermit? Okay. Hopefully all of you do. I mean, it seems fairly obvious that he's the only one that does something for someone else without asking for anything in return. So I would put that number 1. How about second on your list of the most liked characters? This is where it gets a little tricky because after this, there's a lot of faults and stuff going on with all of them. The boy? You would put the boy number 2? Okay. So what was it about the boy that had you put him at number 2?
The other 3 did something bad, right? So he was the only one that, I mean, yeah, he broke up with her or whatever.
Yeah.
Found out and wasn't real nice about it, but
Yeah. Yeah. He wasn't the kindest in how he dealt with the girl and trying to understand what she had just been through. But he stood by whatever value system he had. And so I can understand that. How many had the boy either second or higher on their list? Okay. So a number of you did. Okay. If you didn't have the boy on second on your list, who did you have at number 2? Or the first hermit? The first one that told her that he couldn't really tell her what to do, that she would kind of have to make the choice for herself.
I think most of the people will do that.
Yeah.
Tell you what's the bad, what's the good, but it's your choice.
Okay.
So normally people will do that. So I think.
Okay. So at least he didn't steer her the wrong way. But
she went to him looking for advice, and he basically just said, "You're on your own."
yeah. Yeah.
Put him in the middle. 'Cause
Okay.
He didn't say one thing or the other.
Yeah.
He's like,
Basically just didn't want to get involved.
Okay. Yeah, he was very hands-off. But I think the one thing that he did not do is steer her in the wrong direction. So at least he didn't give her bad advice. That would have been a poor situation. Okay. So
To me, she was looking for help, and he said, I'm not gonna do it.
yeah.
In other words, he kind of made a selfish decision in to say, I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah.
To me, the second most likable person was the girl, even though she made a bad decision.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there was a little bit of selfishness in her decision,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm reading between the lines, I'm kind of thinking that the boy came and said, I've got to go. This is his farewell tour.
Yeah.
Say goodbye, and then off he goes.
Yeah.
She says, but I want to see you one more time. And that's taken from a position of care and love,
Mm-hmm.
but there was a selfish element to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that selfishness is kind of where we get into degrees of selfishness, is what leads you through this progression of likability or not likability.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the girl was the second most likable person for me, and then the first term.
Okay. So the girl was number 2 on the list. What values do you think governed her choices then? Like, yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that. She had some sort of passion in her heart for this boy.
Right.
But again, it doesn't talk about where that stemmed from. So I would agree with that. She never really, again, it doesn't explain, but she never really validates or explains her choices other than, I wanted to go see this boy one more time. But she kind of falls flat everywhere else. So, okay, how about last on your list? Which one was the least likable character in this story? Ferry boat. Okay. Yeah. What was it about his values or lack thereof that had you put him at the last spot? Yeah, he had total lack of values, obviously.
Not totally. He said, if you do this, I will take you there.
Well, that's true. He did keep his word. He did keep his promise. And he was very honest and open. So I guess that is a value that you want from people, right? That,
Not my daughter's boyfriend.
well, hopefully not any of you or anyone you know, but yeah, go ahead.
The book says that one aspect of courage is asking for what you want and saying what you think. So he's courageous.
He is. He's very courageous.
I said the girl was courageous because she asked the ferry boat captain to take her knowing she didn't have any money.
Yeah, she was very courageous too for, knowing she didn't have any money and still asking for the ride. So, any other reasons why you put the ferry boat captain at the very bottom of your list?
He was probably making that journey anyway.
Yeah.
Like, she didn't have to go through that.
Yeah, yeah.
Already known that.
He could have shown compassion. Again, he probably didn't know the situation, but still, if you're a ferry boat captain, like you said, if you know you're already making that trip over and over, it doesn't say here how often he left or what his schedule looked like, but it couldn't have been such a tedious thing that it was gonna be a huge deal for him to do it for free. Any other rankings that you wanted to share based on this situation? Okay, when it comes to moral development, or Ollie already brought up the level of courage, any thoughts? Let's start with moral development. Which of these characters do you think had gone the farthest as far as moral development?
I could be between the second hermit and the boy.
The second hermit and the boy?
Yeah, they're the only ones that show they have like a cognizant system of values. But the second hermit, he's just kind of being compassionate. You're not really told anything more than that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The second hermit does it out of the goodness of humanity almost, that it doesn't really matter what the situation is or who's right or who's wrong or who made a mistake or who did the right thing. He does it because he wants people to be kind to each other, basically, just universally. And then you mentioned the boy as well, because he definitely kind of knew by the end what's right, what's wrong. She cheated on me, and therefore it's over between us. So he did have some sort of moral development that led to his decisions as well. Any of the other characters that you would put high on the list of level of moral development? Or, I mean, I know we probably all agree the ferry boat captain would probably be the lowest on that list when it comes to moral development.
I actually think the girl had higher moral development.
Okay.
Giving her credit for.
Okay.
In the book, it says that courageous leaders believe in a higher purpose.
Okay.
They take risks for causes they believe in.
Okay.
She took a risk.
She did take a risk, yeah.
I mean, she obviously believed that she needed to see him one more time. It's worth it.
Yeah.
Her. And I would say that the boy had low development.
Okay.
Because he was mad at the girl when he should have been mad at the ferry boat captain.
Yeah, yeah. The ferry boat captain kind of gets off easy in this situation. Like, I feel like everyone should be upset at the ferry boat captain, but in reality, the girl probably gets more negative feedback in this scenario than anybody. And it does take a lot of courage, because she felt like she had, what's more important to me? Is it more important for me to see this boy one more time, or this other guy to take advantage of me? She had prioritized, and it did take a lot of courage to say, no, seeing this boy one more time is more important. And so that did show a lot of courage on her part.
Compromised her morals and ethics.
For a higher purpose.
I think her...
That kind of like destroys the ultimate higher purpose of the relationship. Right.
Yeah, it's kind of a catch-22. You know,
She was honest with the boy after the fact.
she was very honest, which again, that takes a lot of courage too. Hopefully, again, none of you have dealt with that scenario, but if you ever had, honesty in that scenario has got to be very difficult. So for her to admit that, especially when she knew this would probably be the last time she would see him for a long, long time, that takes a lot of courage and moral development as well. So that's very true.
I think the captain is also very character, because you think this is the best solution.
Yeah.
And I think he risked his life, I think. If I'm the boy, maybe I will kill him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm surprised the boy didn't have more anger at the ferry boat captain for what happened.
I think the captain risked his life to provide a solution to the girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very, very courage.
Yeah. And the other thing with the boy too is that he knows that the girl is going to have to get back to her island with still no money. And instead of helping her, she has to go to that second hermit to get the money or for help. So the boy kind of left her high and dry in that situation too. Like, not only are we over, it's over between us, but I'm not gonna, he never specifically said it, but he never offered a way to get her back home either. So that was kind of cruel on his part as well.
Kind of a big ask at the moment, though.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the only character that we can all say had a high level of moral development is the second hermit. When it comes to courage, I think the first hermit showed no courage whatsoever. I think we could all argue that the girl did in some ways. The ferry boat captain, in a very evil way, showed some courage. The boy, was he courageous? Did we discuss the boy and his courageous? Was he courageous at all? No.
Being selfish.
He knew what his beliefs and morals were.
Okay.
Relevant to the situation, he didn't compromise what his beliefs and morals were. Right?
He did not compromise, so that could be seen as courageous, but he was fairly forceful in how he showed that his morals were still standing. So unwavering, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. And then I would say, was the second hermit courageous at all? I don't know if courageous would be a word to use for him.
He risked ridicule and for helping this.
Yeah.
Outcast, thank you.
Yeah, he didn't have the money to just give to her, so he had to go into town or on the island and beg for money to get her back to her own island. So I'm sure while getting that money, yeah, there was ridicule, or people were, mocking him, or, throwing money, begrudgingly at him, which it's courageous to put up with that, especially when it's for somebody else that you're doing it for. So I would agree with that as well. Okay, those were all great answers. I appreciate the input on those. Let me see what time it is. Okay, so we've already been here an hour. Let's go ahead and take a break then. We'll be able to finish chapter 7 in one section, and then chapter 8's a little bit longer, but we'll get through that. So let's take a break. It's 7:03. Let's come back at 7:15, and we'll start in with chapter 7. Can you guys hear me in Jefferson City? Thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay, awesome. All right, so let's get started with chapter 7, and we will do chapter 7 here for the next hour, and then we'll do chapter 8 after our next break. So chapter 7 is about followership. So we've looked at leadership and some of the techniques to manage down to others. Followership is really how to manage up or help those, or in a sense lead those that are above you, even though the position may be different. Or of higher in the food chain, or whatever it may be. It's how to develop meaningful relationships with those above you, how to help them to be better leaders, basically. And so that's what we're going to look at in chapter 7. So real briefly, just some of the learning objectives for this chapter. And can everyone see, is the PowerPoint back up in Jefferson City? Can you see it on your screen? Okay, very good. Okay, so for some of the learning objectives, effectively manage both up and down the hierarchy, recognize your followership style and take steps to become a more effective follower, understand the leader's role in developing effective followers, apply the principles of effective followership, including responsibility, service, challenging authority, participating in change, and knowing when to leave. Implement the strategies for effective followership at school and work. Know what followers want from leaders and what leaders expect from followers. And use feedback and leadership coaching to help followers grow and achieve their potential. So chapter 7, I know this is a very simple chart. It just shows 2 arrows working up and working down. But I think this kind of summarizes what this whole chapter is talking about. The idea that, of course, we've got to manage down for those below us. We have to set expectations, rules. We have to lead with integrity, honesty, all the things we've talked about. But now we're going to look at the upward arrow. And how do we do that with those in leadership above us? How can we help them? How can we help motivate them to do better? How can we assist them, encourage them, maybe bring more courage to them, all those type of things. So we're going to look at those here in chapter 7. So managing up, the textbook defines it as consciously and deliberately developing a meaningful, task-related, mutually respectful relationship with your direct superiors. Now, kind of a personal question for all of you, but how many of you have even thought about this concept before in positions you've had where you've had direct superiors above you? Is this something that you've ever thought about before or tried to do in positions that you've had? Okay, so this should be a good chapter then to kind of focus on some new things, or maybe you are doing these things and you didn't even realize it. And so this will help kind of define those things for you. So 2 ideas that come into the idea of managing up. First of all, there's discomfort with the idea of managing bosses. I know in the past I've had some bosses that kind of like some of the case studies we've looked at, the main way that the boss and I connected was if I made a mistake. That's the only time I saw the boss. And so I knew if the boss was around, then he was either going to be mad or upset about something, or I had done something wrong. So the whole point of my motivation was to not have the boss around. So in some ways that can be very hard when you've got a boss like that. There's a lot of discomfort that comes from that when you've got a boss who's maybe unapproachable or someone that you don't have a good personal relationship with. So there's that. And then also the idea of that you're not in control of the relationship. So in a lot of situations, the person who's directly above you, or in most, has the potential to hire other people, fire you, move you to another position. They control your workload, what you're doing on a daily basis. And so you really have no control, at least as far as the duties and responsibilities that are laid out in your job description go. And so that can limit your ability to create good relationships with your leader as well. But we're going to look at some of the things that you can still do, even though these two things kind of create issues with you. Have any of you had bosses like I've had that you felt just a lot of discomfort even approaching just to say hello or see how they were doing? Okay. I've had that too. There's some that, so this is gonna be a challenge for some of these situations. So when you look at leadership roles though, and you look at what they want from the followers or those working underneath them, and so these are important to remember as a follower, that these are things that you need to be doing. The first one is a make it happen attitude, that if you're asked to do something, you do it. If you're asked to not only do something, but figure out the best way to do it, the most efficient way to do it, you're doing that as well. And not that the boss has to be hands off, but you're doing things in a way that you're giving the boss enough, or you're giving enough space and you're doing it well enough that the boss does not have to get involved. So that's what they mean by a make it happen attitude. A willingness to collaborate. So this means that not only collaborate with others around you, but with those above and below you in the hierarchy. So you're always looking for more ways to take on responsibilities or more ways to take things off of the plate of those above you in a respectful and in a way that makes them realize, hey, they're looking out for me. Even though I'm their leader, they're still trying to help out as much as possible with collaboration. The next one is the motivation to stay up to date. So this would mean that whatever job you may have, the latest trends, the latest factors that play into success in that role, you don't need the boss or the leader to keep you updated on those things. You're self-motivated enough to do those on your own, and you can present those to your leader to help generate ideas or to make the business as a whole better based on your own personal motivation to get those things done. And finally, the passion to drive your own growth, which kind of goes along with that as well, that you see areas without the leader having to get involved in your work. You see areas maybe where you are weak or you need to develop in, and you take control of that, and you don't need the leader above you to come down on you hard. You take care of that stuff yourself. And that's something that a lot of leaders appreciate, when you can identify your own weaknesses or things where you can get better at, and you don't need the leader to tell you those things. And I'm sure we're all aware, we all have that self-awareness of what we don't do well. Personally, I know sometimes it does take the leader above me to point out those things before I'm like, oh, okay, I do need to do that better. When in reality, if I just did those things without the boss or leader asking me, it would be a ton better for our relationship. So those are some things to remember as well. Okay, so a couple different styles of followership, and then there's a chart that shows how those styles play into the relationships or engagement between the boss or the leader and those followers underneath them. So the first one is critical thinking versus uncritical thinking. So first of all, I look at uncritical thinking as more like the yes man idea, where somebody that always goes along with what the leader says, or if the leader has an idea, they agree with it. If others around them have an idea, whether it's a good idea or not, they go along with it just to appease the situation, just to not be that devil's advocate or be that person that opposes everything. So an uncritical thinker is someone who just goes along with the status quo and doesn't think for themselves. On the opposite side, a critical thinker is someone who is thinking on their own, thinking progressively for the company or the business, and trying to come up with ideas and ways to do things that go above and beyond maybe things that have done before or what other people have brought up before. So critical thinking here is thinking independently, like I said, and trying to be mindful and achieve the organization's vision is one of the things. And again, uncritical failing to consider possibilities, accepting the leader's ideas without thinking. So hopefully all of you would fall in the critical thinking category. Now, just because you're a critical thinker doesn't necessarily mean that you are doing it to the best of your ability. So the follower type, this chart, which is on page 202 of the textbook, I think gives a good idea of where you want to be and where you don't want to be in an organization. So first of all, an alienated follower, you can see that over there in the far left column. Someone who would be considered an alienated follower is someone who is an independent critical thinker, but they're very passive in the organization. So maybe you're someone that has good ideas or feels like you could contribute in a way to improve the organization, but you don't get involved and you don't share those ideas. Either you're too scared to, or the leader is someone who you know won't listen to you or you don't have the respect of. And so you feel alienated in your position. Has anyone felt that way before? Where you felt like you had good ideas and had a good strategies that might help, but you never brought them to the attention of those around you or above you? Okay, I felt like I've been in that position some. A conformist, this is someone who really doesn't have any new ideas, goes along with the status quo, or is a yes man, but is very active in the organization. So even though they have no original thoughts or ideas, but the ideas of others or the ideas of the leader, they're gung-ho and they're all in on. Have any of you felt like you've been in a situation like this before? Okay, the third one is a pragmatic survivor. And this is someone who, depending on the situation, if it's beneficial to you, can be critical or uncritical in your thinking. And depending on the situation, can be active or passive, depending on the situation. Has anyone been in a situation like this before? Okay. I think all of us have, whether we know it or not. I know it's selfish to think that we're always looking out for ourselves, but I think at some point we all do. If, you know, and so pragmatic survivor is one of those that I think some of us fall into, or all of us do at some point. A passive follower, this is someone who, again, doesn't think for themselves and is also very passive in the organization. So, you know, they just view their job as, well, I just do this for the paycheck, or, you know, I don't put my full effort into it. I don't really care about the organization, but I do it because I need the job, basically. And that's someone who you'd put in that passive follower. And then the one that hopefully all of you reach, or in order to be successful as a follower, is the effective follower. And this is where you're thinking for yourself, you're bringing up new quality ideas, you're learning on your own, but then you're also being active in bringing those ideas to the forefront and keeping people in leadership above you up to date on what you think is the best way to do things, or new ideas, or generating critical ideas that you've come up with. So that would be the ultimate goal. Obviously, the passive follower is at the bottom. That's the one you do not want to be. That does the smallest amount when it comes to followership, but being the effective follower is the one you want to reach. And hopefully all of you have realized that and can reach that in the different positions you've been in. So strategies for managing up. So the first one is understanding the leader. So what they mean by that is not only who the leader is in their position of leadership, but who they are kind of outside of the business as well. So, you know, what are their strengths and weaknesses? I know it's always sometimes it's hard to identify or point out weaknesses, and not necessarily pointing them out publicly, but understanding and being able to potentially help a leader in those areas of weakness. Maybe what are the constraints of the organization? Maybe you realize, hey, the leader's doing the best they can with what we have right now. And so understanding that about a leader, that they have limitations that they're trying to work with. How can I, as a follower, do the best with what I know they have to work with to do these things the best that I can. Specific tactics to improve relationships, be a resource for them. A lot of leaders can't know everything about all departments or all those type of things all at the same time. So being someone who can carry information between departments, or being someone that is connected in a lot of ways and can be honest and open and can be a resource, is very important. You want to help the leader be a good leader. So again, emphasize their strengths, but then also kind of carry the burden of their weaknesses as well. Build a relationship with the leader. So again, who they are outside of the business, what they like to do, understanding who they are and what drives them as an individual, and then view the leader realistically. So I know personally there have been a couple situations where there's been a leader or the president of a university or somebody that, I don't know if any of you have experienced this, but you kind of, when you enter, you view them as like, oh, they're just incredible, or they're above everybody else. But realizing that, hey, they're just a human being too, and they make mistakes, that they have their own faults, they have stresses in their lives that they never talk about. They may have family or friend issues that you have no idea about. So having that empathy and viewing them realistically is really important as well. Okay. Now, the textbook kind of puts those in a stair-step form. I don't necessarily see those as like one building off each other. I think those can kind of be done differently based on the situation. For instance, viewing a leader realistically may be the first thing that you do when you start a new job. Or I don't think necessarily that the resource has to be the first part of the stair step, but it can be done in any order depending on the scenario. But if you were going to list these, which one of these four would you say is the most important as far as building a relationship or influencing a leader? Which of those four stands out?
I mean, I think if you're a resource to the leader, that will help lead to some of the other ones.
So you would say a resource, you start there, and then, yeah, it can kind of filter through all the other ones, okay? Anyone agree or disagree or feel like one of those other categories is more important? I mean, they're all obviously important, but maybe looking back at when you started a new job with a new leader, which of those strategies would you try to start with?
I think building the relationship would be important too. And I
Okay.
think becoming that resource is pretty, it's a good segue.
Yeah. I think personally I would build a relationship first, to kind of understand what makes the person tick, what they need and when they need it, what they want in life, how they want to get there. Because then I think that can define a lot of the other things about how to be a resource or how you can help the leader. And I think the more you know about building a relationship, you can view them more realistically as well. So that's probably where I would start, but resource obviously is very important as well. And it says there, when it says zig where the leader zags, basically what they mean by that is if you see them, drop the ball somewhere, or instead of, asking, should I do this or that, you just go ahead and do it. You see the things that are being missed in the organization, or maybe things that are being overlooked, and you step in and you do those when they need to be done or fulfilled. And again, you don't just point them out to the leader, you go ahead and get them done when you see things that need to be done. So that's kind of what they mean by that. So there are two sources of power for managing up in an organization: personal and position. So personal sources of managing up. First of all, if you want to help your leader, if you want to be a successful follower, you obviously need to know exactly what you're doing and the skills and knowledge necessary to complete your job effectively. Because if you're not going to be, if you can't do your job effectively, then how in the world are you going to be able to help out a leader when you aren't even helping yourself? Is kind of what they mean by that. Expertise, again, not just knowing your job inside and out now, but then also studying the trends, the factors that go into your job, either going to conferences, listening to experts talk about what you do, and continuing to build and continuing to grow in your personal position. The effort you put in, obviously you're not going to be able to be respected or gain a foothold with a leader when you're not putting in full effort on what you're supposed to be doing. And then persuasion as well. You want to be seen as someone who is persuasive in how you work with others, that you can be trusted yourself. And if leaders can see, hey, this person is trustworthy and persuasive around those they work with, then I can trust them to work with me as well. And then on the position side, so what they mean by visible position is the idea of you're putting yourself in a position where communication within the organization has to travel through you in order to get to the leader. So is there feedback coming from somewhere? Did someone say something there? Did you guys hear that, or was it just me? Okay. Sorry, I was getting some feedback from somewhere. I don't hear it. Does anyone hear it now? Were they? Were you guys getting feedback? No? Okay, I'll keep going. Let me know if any of you hear it. Again, though, that was weird. Where was I? Oh, yeah, visible position. So putting yourself in a position where you're seen as a critical piece to the organization, where information or knowledge travels through you from one, yeah, is there a ghost in here? That's weird. From one segment of the business to another. The flow of information kind of going along with that. The information has to flow through you, that you put yourself in a position that's critical to the success of the organization. Central location, once again, you're in a centralized place where they have to rely on you. And then you've built relationships throughout the network, through the business, but also with either competitors or those in the market that you can feed information to leadership on, about, hey, so-and-so's doing this strategy, or, hey, I saw this new idea in this, magazine or article in a newspaper, and you're building those relationships and you're building those networks through that as well. Oh. Okay, so we talked about courage in, was it chapter 8? Or no, chapter 6, I believe. Chapter 6 was the courage. So we're going to look at some of the things, because it will take courage. It can be very hard sometimes to try to manage up and try to focus on working with leaders. So the courage to assume responsibility, the courage to challenge, the courage to participate in transformation, the courage to serve, and the courage to live. So these are all things that require courage when it comes to managing up. One of them that I want to focus on, though, is the courage to challenge. So it might be weird to think that you can step up and challenge the leaders above you, but that does take courage. But has anyone been in a position where you had to challenge someone above you in the hierarchy of a business that you've worked in?
I have experience. His manager
Okay.
is new sales VP into our company to be my boss.
Okay.
He take my business out to other sales.
Okay.
Very
Yeah.
So I must challenge him, get my stuff.
So you had to challenge him. He took away part of what you did,
Yes.
and you had to challenge him to get it back.
Yeah, well, I think my boss can take some change, but I think he should notice me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Has anyone else had to challenge a leader or be vocal in a situation before? Maybe you saw wrongdoing or you saw something going wrong and you had to speak up and say this isn't right. Okay. The other one as well, courage to assume responsibility. Has anyone before had to take charge of something because it either wasn't being done or it wasn't in your job description, but you took the initiative, you were proactive about it, and you took on that role because it needed to be done without the leader telling you to do it? Any examples of that? Okay, but those are some of the things. You can look at those a little bit closer in the textbook, some of the areas of courage in order to manage up. Now, looking at this list here, these are desirable characteristics coming from a leader as well as followers of what they're looking for in each other. So desirable leaders are honest, forward-thinking, inspiring, and competent. And desirable followers are honest, cooperative, dependable, and also competent as well. Are there any adjectives or words that you would add to that list? I know we've looked at leaders a lot, but anything else that you would add to the followers list that would be important that leaders would look for in followers? Motivated. I would agree with that. Anything else? Okay. If you have your textbook, turn to page 207. We're going to do this little in-class activity to find out if you're an annoying follower. So it sounds funny, but hopefully you can determine whether you're an annoying follower or not. So there are 6 questions here. All of them have 2 options for your answer. So we'll go through these, and if you want to write down your answers, and then I'll read you what the appropriate answer should have been to determine what kind of follower you are. So question number 1, if you think there might be a mistake in something you've done, what do you do? Do you A, fess up? It's better to share your concerns up front so your boss can see if there's a problem and get it corrected before it makes him look bad? Or B, try to hide it for now. Maybe there isn't really a problem, so there's no use in making yourself look incompetent. Okay, number 2, how do you handle a criticism from your boss? Do you A, poke your head in her door or corner her in the cafeteria multiple times to make sure everything is okay between the two of you? Or B, take the constructive criticism, make sure you understand what the boss wants from you, and get on with your job? Okay, number 3, you're in a crowded elevator with your boss after an important meeting where you've just landed $1 million deal. Do you A, celebrate the victory by talking to your boss about the accomplishment and the details of the meeting? Or B, keep your mouth shut or talk about non-business related matters? Number 4, your boss has an open door policy and wants people to feel free to drop by her office anytime to talk about anything. You pop in just after lunch and find her on the phone. What do you do? Do you A, leave and come back later? Or do you B, wait? You know most of her phone calls are quick, so she'll be free in a few minutes. Number 5, you've been called to the boss's office and have no idea what he wants to talk about. Do you A, you show up on time, empty-handed to concentrate on what the boss has to say? Or B, you show up on time with a pen, paper, and your calendar or mobile device? And then finally 6, you've been trying to get some FaceTime with your boss for weeks and luckily catch him or her in the bathroom. You A, take care of personal business and get out of there, or B, grab your chance to schmooze with the boss, ask a question or tell a joke. You might not get another chance anytime soon. Okay, so those are the 6 questions. So let's go through and see if you're an annoying follower or not. So for question number 1, if you think there might be a mistake in something you've done, what do? So for A, it's fess up and tell the truth. Or B, you try to hide it for now. You don't want to look incompetent. So how many of you put A for that one? You would fess up and tell the truth. Okay, how many put B? I put B for that one. I know that's wrong. The right answer to not be annoying is A. You want to be honest and fess up, but I have to admit that exactly. There is a chance maybe you were the one who thought it was a mistake, but maybe it really wasn't, or it's something that can be corrected quickly and no one needs to know about it. So that one, A is the correct answer. So those of you that said A, good job. If you said B, then you're on my side and we'll work our way through that together. Okay, so number 2, how do you handle criticism from your boss? So do you A, poke your head in her door and make sure everything is okay? Or do you take the criticism and understand what the boss wants from you and get on with your job? So how many put A for that one? How many put B? Okay, so B is the correct answer, that you're not annoying if you do that. You want to have the thick skin. You do not want to be, as they say in the book, a door swinger. A door swinger is someone who wants to get involved or take everything directly to the boss. You do not want to be a door swinger who every time there's some issue is going to the boss with that issue. Okay, question 3, you're in a crowded elevator. You just landed $1 million deal. Do you A, celebrate the victory, or do you B, keep your mouth shut or talk about non-business related matters? So how many of you said A? Okay, how many of you said B? Okay, so the correct answer is B, and the reason they say that is you have no idea who else is in the elevator, so you need to keep your mouth shut. But if there's no one else in the elevator, then I see no problem answering A to that. Yeah.
I would maybe just be like, oh, I closed that deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somewhere in the middle.
So maybe mentioning it, but not A said celebrating it at that very moment.
Yeah. So
I would agree with that. Okay. Any other thoughts on that? Okay, question 4. Your boss has an open door policy and wants people to feel free to drop by her office anytime. So you pop in and find her on the phone. Do you A, leave and come back, or B, wait because you know her phone calls are usually pretty quick? How many said A? How many said B? Okay. For those of you that said A, why would you do that?
Generally out of respect for their time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now I know I'm sure, were you thinking about like Dr. Bailey when you were thinking of that one? See, with him, I would agree with you that,
I'll just go into his office.
yeah. And some bosses are like that. And more than likely what he's talking about probably has something to do with you anyway. So I would say A most of the time, but then there are some bosses where B, I would say, is totally fine. So that one's a little bit tricky, but A most of the time would be the right answer. Okay. Question 5, you've been called to the boss's office and have no idea what he wants to talk about. So do you A, show up on time empty-handed to concentrate on what he has to say, or show up with a pen, paper, in your calendar or mobile device? How many of you put A? How many of you put B? Okay.
I wouldn't show up with pen and paper, but I would have my phone.
Yeah, yeah. So not necessarily pen and paper, but having something to either take notes on or take a memo of some sort or a voice message to yourself. So it says here, you can usually be safe in assuming your boss hasn't called you in for idle chit chat. So make sure you're ready to write something down. And then the last one, you've been trying to get some FaceTime with your boss for weeks and luckily catch him or her in the bathroom. So do you A, take care of personal business and get out of there? Or B, grab your chance to schmooze, ask a question or tell a joke, and because you don't know if you'll get another chance anytime soon. So how many of you put A for that? How many of you put B? Okay.
It depends on the relationship you have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I feel awkward if I had a good relationship with someone.
Yeah.
That's a weird.
Yeah. Yeah. There are certain people where B is totally fine, and it's not awkward. It's just, how about, did you watch that game last night? Or, hey, I saw this funny joke on TV, or, man, can you believe the wildfires in California right now? Or something like that, just to, lighten the mood, or they know that you care and things like that. But then there are people where it's just like, I just need to just get out of here. So yeah, that's always an interesting situation. They say A is the right answer for that, but I think B can be the right answer depending on the situation and who the person is. So probably tomorrow, all of you are going to find yourself in one of those situations. So remember back to this, what we talked about here, and make the wise decision based on that. I'll be interested next week. I'll have to try to remember to ask you all if you experienced any of those scenarios during the week and how you dealt with those in your personal life. Okay. Okay. So some of the things that we look for from, let me go to the right page here. Let's see what time it is. Okay, I'm going to skip this for now. I'm going to go on to leadership coaching. So leadership coaching is the idea of a method of directing or facilitating a follower with the aim of improving specific skills or achieving a specific development goal. So this is what followers are kind of looking for from leaders in order to improve as a follower. This chart, which is on page 215 of the textbook, gives a good idea of what are followers looking at from leaders. And you can see there that clear, direct feedback is number one. The more followers feel that they're getting feedback from a leader, the better off they're going to be. Number two is a new perspective, new ideas or new ways to do their job better. Advice on handling situations, and then you can go down from there. But all of those are kind of what they mean by leadership coaching. How can leaders better coach those underneath them? Okay, feedback. So this kind of goes along with the clear, direct feedback idea. And there are 4 things to focus on when you're focusing on feedback from a leader, or looking for from a leader when it comes to feedback. The first one, and I don't know if this is in, yes, it is in here. The first one is to make it timely. Many of you have probably experienced this before, where you do something really well, but you don't get any feedback on it for a long time. Or you do something poorly, but you don't get any feedback on it for an extended period of time. So it's very important when it comes to feedback to make it timely. Let people know that you realize what they did, and do it in a very quick and close to when it actually happened way. Focus on the performance, not the person. This really goes for when you have to point out mistakes. You don't want to tear down the person as an individual, but point out that they made a mistake, something with the business, and not necessarily that they're a terrible person because they made that mistake. You want to make it specific so people know exactly what you did well or what you did not do well. So there's no ambiguity in what's being looked for from a leader. And then also focus on the desired future, not the past. I know this one has been a struggle for a lot of the leaders I've had, where they want to focus more on what's gone wrong in the past. And that's a very negative approach to things. But instead of doing that, building toward the future is very important as well. Okay, so for those of you who have your textbook, turn to page 217. We're going to do one more activity before we finish this chapter. And this one is, how ready are you as a follower to be coached by those above you in a leadership position? So there's 8 questions here. We're going back to the idea of answering by either saying mostly true or mostly false. So let's go through these together, 1 through 8, and let me know when it comes to your attitude toward personal growth, how you would answer these. So number 1, I have a strong desire to improve myself. Is that mostly true or mostly false? Number 2, I welcome suggestions for better ways of behaving. Is that mostly true or mostly false? Number 3, I am really honest with myself about my strengths and weaknesses. Is that mostly true or mostly false? Number 4, I welcome negative feedback. Is that mostly true or mostly false? Number 5, I follow through on commitments to change myself. Is that mostly true or mostly false? Number 6, I am very open with my peers about any mistakes I make. Is that mostly true or mostly false? Number 7, I draw my boss's attention to my successes. Is that mostly true or mostly false? And then number 8, after making a mistake, I immediately let the affected people know about it and propose a solution. Is that mostly true or mostly false? Does anyone need me to repeat any of those? Okay, so if you answered mostly true for any of those, give yourself a point. So count up how many of those you marked mostly true. Okay, so obviously the top score you can get is 8. Did anyone score 6 or above? Okay, so a couple of you. That means that you're very prepared, or your attitude is in a position where those in leadership above you can help coach you, and you're in a position where you can have impact on the leaders above you as well. How many of you scored like 3, 4, or 5? Okay. So that's a position where there is improvement that can be made. You probably have the correct mindset, but there are other ways that you can be receptive to coaching. And then who scored? Anyone 0, 1, or 2? Okay, so that's good. That means that all of us at least are ready in some way. So looking at those 8, if you have your textbook in front of you, which of those would say is the hardest one for you to, or the one that you put mostly false, and it was a very strong mostly false, like there was no doubt that's what you struggle with? So number 4, I welcome negative feedback.
Is it constructive negative feedback?
It doesn't say.
It's just like horrible.
It doesn't say. So that's negative feedback. It doesn't say if it's constructive or not.
And is it coming from our boss?
Again, it doesn't say.
Sorry.
So what did you mark? Did you put mostly true for
Well,
that?
I was thinking in terms of in a work setting.
Okay.
I did say mostly true.
Okay. Okay. I put mostly false for number 4. I don't like negative feedback either. It's hard to take that. So I would say I do not welcome negative feedback. Okay. Any others that you put mostly false for that you just know you struggle with those? Number 7, I draw my boss's attention to my successes. I put mostly false for that too. If I do things well, I want other people to recognize them, but I don't want to be the one that makes them recognize them. That's hard for me too. So I would agree. Now there are some things that, you know, if I know my boss has really been looking for them from me, then I might, you know, send her an email and be like, hey, you know, that thing you wanted, or hey, I got that done, so you should see that in your, you know, mailbox the next day or something. But I'm not someone who, you know, I'm not going to call my boss tonight and be like, hey, we had a great class tonight or anything like that. So that's one that I struggle with as well. Any of the others that you put mostly false for? Number 6, I am very open with my peers about any mistakes I make. Yeah, I put mostly false for that. Just so you know, I scored 4 on this. So don't think that this is something that I'm super good at either. So I put mostly false for I'm very open with my peers about any mistakes I make. If you put mostly true for that, congratulations, because that's something that's really, really good. I could not do that. If I make mistakes, I like to not tell anybody and take care of them myself. And I don't want people to know that I messed up. So that's very true.
Number 3 is, I don't know that I'm fully self-aware.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Number 3 is very difficult. Yeah. That takes time to learn about your strengths and your weaknesses and being on. I know my weaknesses, but it's a matter of, am I motivated to fix those weaknesses? At least for me, I feel like I can put mostly true for that. But if they asked, are you willing to work on your weaknesses when you actually know them? I'd probably have to say mostly false, because I struggle with that. The other one that I put mostly false for is after number 8. After making a mistake, I immediately let the affected people know about it and propose a solution. If worse comes to worse, that's what I'll do. But if I can figure out a solution without it affecting other people as much, or taking care of it before other people recognize the mistake, that's the path I'd rather go. So I'm not going to go out every time I make a mistake and be like, hey, everybody, I made this mistake. I'm going to fix it, though. I'm going to try to fix it first before I go out and tell everybody about it. So any other answers that you put mostly false to that really stuck out to you? Hopefully all of you put mostly true for number 1. I feel like that one kind of stands out and, again, kind of filters through all the others. I have a strong desire to improve myself. Whether you can define improvement or not and how you're going to improve yourself, hopefully at least all of you have that desire to continue to improve. And obviously taking this class, getting your master's, is one way in which you all are doing that. To improve your job status or your social status, or however it may be. So that's something that all of you, if you put mostly false for number 1, then you need to change that to mostly true, because you all are taking control of your futures and improving just by taking these classes. So,
Yeah, but it took me a lot longer to get to that point.
well, you know what? I've seen we talked about it. We had a faculty meeting on Thursday that during the pandemic, that master's courses in adult learning are skyrocketing right now, because a lot of people who are either out of work or looking to improve their positions in life are getting back in school. So it's prevalent across the country right now that master's programs, adult online programs are benefiting, whether you want to say benefiting, but if there's one good thing that's come from this pandemic, it's that a lot of people have gone back to school to increase their education. So that's been, if there's a positive to take away, that's been one of the positives. Okay, we will stop there. That's the end of chapter 7. Just real quick, so you know what the assignments are for chapter 7 before we take our second break. Okay, so for chapter 7, you will have 2 discussion boards. One discussion board for chapter 7, which is the leadership at work, which is on page 219. Don't worry about the little part where it says in class on page 220. Just look at the 2 questions or the 2 fill in the blanks kind of on page 219 for that. And then also the case study for chapter 7 is Jake's Petland. It starts on page 221, goes over to page 222, and there are 3 questions that go along with that case study. So pretty self-explanatory. I've really tried to make every single chapter, every single week look exactly the same, so you have a little bit of continuity between everything. So are there any questions about chapter 7? It's a little bit shorter of a chapter, but I think it's a good one that we go through. Okay, so chapter 8, we'll take a break, but I just wanted to let you know, we're going to switch over. We're entering another section in the textbook that's going to look at the leader as a relationship builder. The first chapter in this section is chapter 8, where we're going to look at motivation and empowerment and some of the categories that go into that. So let's see what time it is. 8:09. Let's come back at 8:20. So that gives you 11 minutes. And we'll do chapter 8. And we should be able to finish that in one section. So we'll try to wrap up around 9 or 9:15 tonight. So go ahead and take a break, and we'll be back in about 10 minutes. Can you guys hear me in Jeff City? Okay, awesome. Okay, let's get started on chapter 8. I think we should be able to finish this in one time period. So we'll get out of here. Let's see what time it is. About 8:25. So we should be out of here by about 9:15 or so after this section is over. So we're going to be looking at chapter 8. And can you all see chapter 8 on your screen there in Jeff City? Yes? Okay, awesome. All right, so chapter 8 is talking about motivation and empowerment, and so we're going to be looking at that. We'll look at the learning objectives very quickly. Recognize and apply the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. Appropriately tap into the motives that induce people to take action to accomplish important goals. Motivate others by meeting their higher level needs. Apply needs-based theories of motivation and understand how the concept of equity applies to motivation. Describe the psychological and structural elements of empowerment and how empowerment contributes to motivation. Apply the job characteristics model to enrich jobs. And then finally, identify factors that play a role in employee engagement and use engagement to meet higher level needs. And then also building a thriving workforce by giving people a sense of making progress, toward meaningful goals. Okay, so the textbook defines motivation as the forces either internal or external to a person that arouse enthusiasm and persistence to pursue a certain course of action. So first, looking at motivation as a whole, without getting into any specifics in the books, what would you say you as an individual is your greatest motivation in life? Has anyone thought about that before? What motivates you, especially getting your master's here at Carson Newman? What motivated you to get your master's? What was the greatest motivation behind that? Higher position? More money, more valuable, or adding more value to others? Okay. To your family, it's motivational, just, you know, helping them out. Make parents proud or make family and friends proud. Okay. Any other reasons why? Motivation behind getting your master's? Okay. So hopefully all of you have some sort of motivation, because if you didn't have motivation, then you wouldn't be productive. I'm sure all of you can think of situations where you had things that you either had to do or tasks that you were asked to complete. And if you don't have motivation to do them, you're not going to be productive in those areas. So part of a leader's job is to channel followers' motivation toward the accomplishment of organization's vision and goals. And so not only do the individuals have to be motivated, but then they have to find ways, especially from a leadership position, to motivate others. How many of you have worked for, any specific examples of leaders that you've worked for that have been highly motivated and that motivation has been contagious to everyone in the organization? Has anyone had a boss or a leader like that? Okay, so I'm seeing a couple heads nod on that. How about on the flip side, that you had a very unmotivated leader or someone that did not exude enthusiasm or motivation, and therefore productivity levels and motivation of those working for them was very low? Has anyone experienced that before? Okay, a couple nods as well. So the leader is very important when it comes to motivation, obviously. So things that leaders need to think about in order to motivate others, and we'll look at some of the theories of motivation here in just a minute, but two of the ways are to satisfy the follower's needs and then also to encourage high work performance. So we're going to look at those a little bit closer. On page 228 of the textbook, this graph or chart is also on that page, but this is a very simple but very useful way to look at motivation. First of all, the first box there talks about people's needs. People obviously taking a job are looking for some way to fulfill those needs, whether it's making money in order to buy shelter, food, clothing, supply things for a family, friends, whoever it may be. People have a need for friendship or working with others. The recognition, the feeling that they need recognition or to achieve something. Everyone has some sort of need in life. And so one of the reasons people get involved in organizations or business or a job is because of those needs. If they feel that they're motivated to meet those needs, then there's going to be a behavior which results in the action in order to fulfill those needs. So if you have the need to feel recognition or achievement, then there are going to have to be certain actions that you take and behaviors that you take in order to fulfill those needs. And then if you are able to fulfill those needs and you're rewarded, you're going to satisfy those needs. And we're going to look at intrinsic and extrinsic rewards here in just a minute. And I'll be interested to hear some of the differences you all might have in those. But if you do meet those needs by doing the behavior necessary, you're going to reach those rewards. Now, in some situations, maybe you put in the behavior that's necessary, but you don't receive those rewards. So this arrow that circles back around is kind of an analysis of either feedback, personal feedback, or feedback from others that helps inform the person whether the behavior was appropriate and should be used again, or if it was inappropriate, not necessarily inappropriate, but didn't work the way you thought and things need to change. So this is a constant cycle of motivation. Like it says, it's a very simple model, but I would say all of us in some way, shape, or form are working through this model right now. For instance, all of you have a need or a desire to complete your master's degree. And so right now you would all probably be in this middle red square where you're putting in action the behavior that you feel is necessary in order to accomplish that. Now, hopefully all of you will reach this purple, I guess. Is that purple or dark blue? I'm not sure. Maybe dark blue. Hopefully all of you reach that finish line, and then you realize, hey, I was able to accomplish my master's degree. Now you can go back around and figure out, okay, I've had that accomplishment or achievement. What next? And that's a constant cycle that hopefully all of us travel through life with different things, and hopefully we'll look at a theory of motivation from Maslow in a couple minutes, and that can kind of help define that as well. So we all have different rewards that we're looking for in life. Everybody is looking for different things, and those are broken down into two different sections: intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. So intrinsic rewards are internal satisfactions that come along with success or being successful in some way, the process of performing a particular action. Extrinsic rewards are rewards given by another person, or they're an outwardly way of rewarding oneself or someone else for performing an action. So just looking at these two, maybe you've looked in the textbook or thought about these, but what are some of the intrinsic rewards that people are looking for as an individual that are internal and you can't really see, but they can motivate someone to do better? Appreciation, absolutely. Anything else that you would say is an intrinsic reward?
Sense of accomplishment.
Yeah, yeah.
Having completed whatever it is.
Yeah, you can't necessarily see that or feel it or touch it, but a sense of accomplishment is something internal that you can kind of wear as a badge for yourself, even though maybe other people don't recognize that about you. Yeah.
Like the second hermit.
The what?
Like the second hermit from the.
Yeah, you're doing it for the betterment of society, potentially. Again, doing it out of the kindness or goodness of your heart and feeling that you did it and you followed your morals and values, and that's a reward to yourself, that, hey, I accomplished this and I did it based on my personal beliefs. Okay? How about some extrinsic rewards? What are some of those that you can see, you can feel, you can touch them, you can, people can see what you've been given? What are some of those? Status. Yep, maybe getting a promotion, or like I know at Carson Newman, like right now I'm an assistant professor. The next level up would be like an associate professor and then a full professor. So the status of where you are on that can be an extrinsic reward based on your accomplishments. Okay. What are some other extrinsic rewards? Obviously, like a pay raise or a bonus that you might receive. So money is obviously an intrinsic reward that we're all looking for, and probably one of the reasons why you're getting your MBA is hopefully to receive a larger salary, or, you know, I know some companies give bonuses if you get your MBA or some sort of reward in that way. Other rewards could be celebrations of some sort, or some sort of prize, or something for completing, maybe some days off from work, or extra vacation days, or you know, a dress down day. you know, or have some sort of party, have a pizza party, or, you know, the boss brings in donuts one morning because you accomplished something, or things like that. Anything else that you would say would be extrinsic rewards? I know in the military, earning like different medals, or obviously like the Purple Heart, or not necessarily that you're working to receive some of those, but it's a reward for what you've done and accomplished. And some military veterans that's one of their motivation, is to earn those stripes and to reach the highest levels that they can in the military. So that can be very rewarding. Sometimes it can just be to finish at the top of your class. I don't know how many of you, when you're in high school or college or wherever, seeing your name at the top of your class, or when they listed GPAs for your class, sometimes they do that, seeing that you were in the top 5 or whatever. That's a visible thing that for some people, seeing their name and, you know, highlighted can be an extrinsic reward in itself, just knowing that other people realize your accomplishments. Anything else that you would say? Yeah. Some stock share options. Yeah, absolutely. Some companies have that. If you do something good or you've accomplished enough goals, you're given some of their stock, or some way that they make you an owner, or some piece of the corporation as a whole. That's a good one. Okay, so those are all good. I appreciate that. I think you guys are on the right track when it comes to those. So we're looking now at 2 different types of motivation. Not necessarily that one is better than the other, but conventional management is more on the lower side of things. This is working towards the basic needs of people, working with people that maybe aren't quite as motivated as others. This is, you know, if you're running a grocery store or a McDonald's or something, it's not bad. That's very good. You can have successful people working for you, but more than likely, people in those positions that work for those type of businesses don't have the same amount of motivation, at least not yet, as people in other positions. So conventional management, and this chart is on page 230, the needs of people in those positions, you're trying to meet their lower needs. So again, are they getting money? Do they have shelter? Do they have clothing? Do they have food? Do they have transportation? Are they able to get health insurance, or whatever it may be? Those lower needs that everybody needs to have. The carrot and stick idea of extrinsic motivation, where a lot of people in those positions need something that they can see and is attainable in order to be successful. It takes a little bit more control from a leader in those positions. And then also, you're looking for adequate effort. If people are getting the job done, maybe they're not going above and beyond, but if they're getting the job done, then you need to recognize that. On the other side, you look at leadership. And this is where you're going above and beyond with motivation. You're working with people that have higher needs in life. Maybe it is reaching a certain position, or to, you know, reach a certain salary that they've always been wanting, or, you know, maybe they've always dreamed of owning a boat, and they're motivated by that. Maybe they want to go on a cruise around the world, and they're motivated by that. This is when you're dealing with a little bit higher motivation. More intrinsic motivation, people, obviously money, things that they can collect or take on are important, but then also the intrinsic, am I accomplishing what I feel I can accomplish? Am I proud of what I've accomplished? Can I do more? Those type of things. Employee engagement, this is where you're not just controlling people, but now you're including them in decisions, giving them the motivation of, I'm empowering you to do more in this business. And we'll look at empowerment here and engagement a little bit later. And then also the best effort. No longer are you just looking for adequate or, you're meeting your goals. Now you're looking for people who are going above and beyond the goals that even you've set for them, and looking for that best effort from people. Okay, so there are 4 ways to define extrinsic and intrinsic motivation and ways to approach those things. So you may think that extrinsic and intrinsic are always going to be in the positive end, but sometimes they can be viewed from a negative approach. So you can see here the top left square or rectangle talks about an extrinsic positive approach, which is kind of what we've already talked about, where people are looking for those things that they can touch, they can feel, pay raises, bonuses, praise, those outward things that people see and they can feel and other people can see as well. The box right below that, which is kind of a mustard yellow color, I guess you would say, intrinsic positive approach, where people get a sense of accomplishment out of their work. They enjoy their work. They feel comfortable in their work. Those are all positive intrinsic approaches. Going up to the green square, extrinsic negative approach. This is where not necessarily good, but it is an approach that some leaders take. This is where they threaten or they punish, maybe taking away raises, maybe lowering the level of where you are in the institution or organization. Maybe it's taking away vacation days or taking away a Saturday that, or people having to come in and work on Saturday if goals or accomplishments weren't met. Hopefully none of you have had situations like this, but maybe you have, I don't know. But these are things where positive would be that you're getting these things. Negative would be that you're having to give these things up. And people can see that you're giving those up. I know, for instance, my first year out of college, I was an admissions counselor on campus. And I'll admit it, I wasn't the best admissions counselor. That was not my cup of tea. And so there was one time during the summer when we're trying to finalize the incoming freshman class, and my numbers were a little behind. So I had to come in on a Saturday and call all of my students who had paid their deposit but had not yet declared one way or the other, not as necessarily punishment, but as a negative that, showed me in an outwardly way that you need to step up and stuff like that. So maybe some of you have experienced that as well. And then finally, in the orange rectangle, intrinsic negative approach, this is where you tap into their self-doubt or their anxieties. You can build stress in people. Again, these are not good ways to motivate people, but some people do. If someone might say, if you don't accomplish this, what are you doing with your life? Or, you want to be viewed as a good worker, right? Or things like that, that they kind of play with your head and they can tap into that self-doubt and build into negative aspects of yourself intrinsically. Has anyone experienced that before? Someone who played mind games with you from a leadership role, or tried to motivate you by kind of putting you down in a backhanded way? Potentially. Yeah, I've experienced that too. That can build, like it says down here, pain and fear. Like I said, when I was an admissions counselor, that did build pain. I mean, it was not fun to do. And I can imagine that in that orange rectangle, you'd start to fear people and that, they're really challenging who I think I am right now. And that's really difficult to deal with. Okay, we're going to look at 3 different needs-based theories. You might have heard of some of these if you've taken psychology classes or human development classes before. You might have looked at these before. But we're going to look at 3 different ones. We're going to start with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Then we're going to look at a 2-factor theory and then an acquired needs theory. So I'll probably spend more on the hierarchy of needs than the other ones because that one I feel like is the one that's most generally taught, or at least most well known in a lot of areas. So Maslow, who is a scientist, came up with this hierarchy of needs, and that he theorized that humans are motivated by multiple needs, and those needs exist in a hierarchical order. So what that means is that, here, I'll show you the chart, and that is on page 233 if you want to look at it in the textbook. The most basic need of humans is in the blue square, or the blue circle down here, which is the physiological needs. This is the need for water, air, you know, housing, shelter, food, clothing. Those are the basic needs of all humans. Now, those needs, if those have been filled in our lives, then we can move on to the next one, which is safety needs. But we don't move on, according to Maslow, we don't move on to safety needs until we've accomplished the needs of physiological needs. So they build upon each other, and you can't go to the next one until the other ones have been fulfilled. So again, the first one is physiological. The next one is safety needs, where we feel safe at work. We feel that our work is treating us right. We're getting some sort of benefits and job security from our job itself. If you feel you have those, you move on to belongingness needs, where you've got work groups, friends, coworkers, supervisors, and you feel like you have a place in the organization as a whole, or in life as a whole. The next are esteem needs, and this is not just that you're working with others or you're around others, but you're recognized for what you do. People approve of what you do. You reach certain statuses that you're looking for. You feel that your responsibilities are continually increased over time. Those are all esteem needs. And then finally, the top overall need or hierarchy is the self-actualization needs. And this is where you feel that there's opportunities for advancement. You can work on your own autonomously. Growth is possible, and creativity are all possible. So that is how Maslow defined needs and how people can become motivated to accomplish their needs. So I would say right now, I would be in the esteem needs section. That is still kind of where I am. I don't think I've reached the point where I'm at the self-actualization yet. I would imagine most of us in this class or in Jeff City are either in the belongingness or the esteem needs section. Maybe some of you feel like you're almost to self-actualization. Some of you might be there. So we're all different. We all are in different categories, but this is kind of what Maslow wrote about or taught about. So looking at this, does anyone agree, disagree, think that maybe he's off? Any of those notions that you think about that either right or wrong with this theory? No? Okay, that's fine. The next theory then is the two-factor theory. And this is where there are basically two factors to why people are motivated. The first one is hygiene factors. And again, these are kind of going back to Maslow's theory. These are more of the physiological needs, or the ones that make us feel as if, you know, we're accomplishing the absolute things that we need to accomplish. So again, your working conditions come into play with that. Your pay, are you following the policies, interpersonal relationships? So it kind of matches up just in a different way with Maslow. And then motivators, these are where are you satisfied with your job? Are you seeking higher level jobs? Are you recognized in your job? Are you achieving things? Is there growth possible in your job? So similar to Maslow's, just in a little different way of writing it out. There is a chart on page 235, which defines or outlines this idea of the two-factor theory. So in life, he came up with the idea that the motivating theories are theories that satisfy you, and the hygiene factors are areas where you can be dissatisfied. So motivators, the only way you can go is up with those basically. and the hygiene factors influence how far down you can go. And so he came up with that idea. How satisfied are you? And you have to fulfill the hygiene factors before you can get into the motivators. That's what he was kind of saying there. Okay, McClelland came up with the idea of the acquired needs theory. And this, again, is kind of a chain, kind of like Maslow's theory, that once you've acquired one thing, you move on to the next. Once you've acquired that, you move on to the next. There is a chart on page, well, maybe do they not have it in here? Okay, maybe it's just written out. But he came up with the idea that there are kind of three needs that we're all trying to meet in life. The first one is the need for achievement. If we feel that we've reached the need for achievement, then we're looking for the need for affiliation. And if we meet that, then we're looking for the need for power. Now, not everyone necessarily is looking for the same type of power in life, but we're all looking in some way, and maybe some of you don't feel like you're here yet, where you have a desire to influence or control others, be responsible for others, and have authority over others. Some of you might feel this way if you have children, or if you're in a coaching situation, or if you are in a leadership situation. Not necessarily that you need that, but that's a position that you filled in life. A few other motivational theories. Again, we're not going to look at these real closely, but there's a page or two on each of these. So the reinforcement theory, the expectancy theory, and the equity theory. Okay, before we do that, I wanted to do another in-class activity on page 237. So if you have your textbook on page 237, I want to go through these 12 questions, and again, you're going to mark either mostly true or mostly false for these answers. So what you need to do is think of a specific job, or if you're a full-time student, think of your classes and study activities as your job, and answer the following questions about those work activities. Okay, so number one, I feel physically safe at work. Is that mostly true or mostly false? Number two, I have good health benefits. Is that mostly true or mostly false? Number three, I am satisfied with what I'm getting paid for my work. Mostly true or mostly false? Number four, I feel that my job is secure as long as I want it. Is that mostly true or mostly false? Number five, I have good friends at work. Is that mostly true or mostly false? Number six, I have enough time away from my work to enjoy other things in life. Is that mostly true or mostly false? Number seven, I feel appreciated at work. Is that mostly true or mostly false? Number eight, people at my workplace respect me as a professional and expert in my field. Mostly true or mostly false? Number nine, I feel that my job allows me to realize my full potential. Mostly true or mostly false? Number 10, I feel that I am realizing my potential as an expert in my line of work. Mostly true or mostly false? Number 11, I feel I'm always learning new things that help me to do my work better. Mostly true or mostly false? And then number 12, there is a lot of creativity involved in my work. Okay, so how this breaks down, and it kind of goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but it also goes into the other two that we looked at as well. So questions 1 and 2 hopefully you answered mostly true for, that you feel physically safe and that you also feel like you have good health benefits or you can stay in good health in the position that you are. Questions 3 and 4 talk more about your pay and your job security. Hopefully all of you feel those as well. Those go into that second hierarchy of needs of economic and safety needs. Questions 5 and 6 talk about belonging and social needs. So do you have enough time away from your life to do other things you like to do, and do you feel appreciated at work? Questions 7 and 8 are self-esteem. Do you feel like people view you as a professional or expert and that you're realizing your full potential? And then questions 9 through 12, this is the highest level of needs according to Maslow, the self-actualization, that you're reaching your full potential, that you're realizing your potential as an expert, you're learning new things to help you do your work better, and there's a lot of creativity involved in my work. So how many of you were able to answer mostly true for all of those? Was anyone able to do that? Okay. What is that? Oh, you were thinking of 2 different jobs? Okay. Does one make you feel closer to all 12 than the other, or? Okay. Okay. Anyone else that answered mostly true for a good majority of those? Okay. Okay. Now, what Maslow would say is that you should be answering mostly true up until a point, and then it would be mostly false from there on down. So he would say in a perfect world, or according to his way of doing things, that at some point 1 through 12, you're going to be marking mostly true, and then at some point after that, it's going to be mostly false. So did anyone have that when they were answering where it was mostly true up to a point, and then after that it was all mostly false? Okay, did anyone have kind of a scattered mostly true, mostly false throughout? Okay, okay. So there could, so in some of these questions, the way they're worded could be why, but based on those 3 theories that we looked at, they would all say that the 1 through 6 probably, hopefully all of you have to some extent, and you're working on 7 through 12 or whatever. So that would be the ultimate goal. So that gives you an idea of things, and hopefully all of you at some point in your career are able to say mostly true to all of those. I would say that I can say mostly true to about 9 of those. There's a couple in there that, depending on the wording or where I am right now, I'd say mostly false, but I could see myself getting there in my current position if I keep working hard. So hopefully that's a good way to look at it. Okay, so looking at these 3 other theories, we'll just look at these very quickly. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but the reinforcement theory is basically the idea that you look at the relationship between behavior and its consequences by changing or modifying followers' on-the-job behavior through the appropriate use of immediate rewards or punishments. How many of you feel like the leaders that you've worked for, this is the main theory that they use? That the way they motivate others is by either rewarding or adjusting the way, either rewarding or not rewarding people for what they do. Okay, this one's fairly popular with a lot of leaders, especially with extrinsic benefits, that the best way that they know how to motivate people is to give those extrinsic benefits to people doing things right, not given to people doing things wrong. And that's how you're going to motivate people to do better, is by giving them those benefits or through the use of those rewards or punishments that you give. Okay, so that's what they're kind of looking for when they use the reinforcement theory, is that over time, if they're giving benefits at the right times, if they're giving punishments at the right times, that people will realize, okay, well, this is how I have to do things in order to be rewarded or be punished. So over time, you're going to modify your behavior to fit what's being rewarded and what's being punished. And that's what behavior modification comes down to. Another way is the law of effect. This is fairly common with children, but it continues to go up through time, that if something you do leads to positives, you're going to continue to do it. If something you do leads to negatives, hopefully you stop doing that. Now, I know a lot of children can be very defiant and not listen. Hopefully none of you when you were kids did that, but the law of effect should state that if positive rewards come from something, I'm going to do that. If negatives come from this, I'm going to stop doing that. So maybe some of you did not learn that as a kid, but hopefully all of you did. So the whole idea of reinforcement comes into play. And this is how you cause, or how you want to cause, a certain behavior to be repeated or inhibited. So we're going to look at some of the different ways to give reinforcement. The first one is positive reinforcement. Again, this is rewarding correct behavior or the behavior that you're trying to allow or to be part of the administration. So pleasant rewards for the correct behavior is positive reinforcement. Negative reinforcement, on the other hand, which we've kind of touched on, is unpleasant consequences for behavior that is not or needs to be improved. So that's negative. Punishment goes a little bit farther than negative consequences, and this is where employee is put into an imposition in order to teach them that the desire or the behavior was undesirable. So again, for me, having to come in on that Saturday, I viewed as a punishment, and probably was a punishment for not getting my students there. And then finally, extinction. And this is where you totally take away a reward. Really, there's no way coming back for it. There's no longer, the behavior is no longer reinforced, and hence is less likely to occur in the future. So this is the total stripping of all positives. It could come all the way down to being fired or released from a job, depending on how poorly the person is doing the job. This chart, which is on page 239 of the textbook, shows how behavior can be shaped with reinforcement. So you can see there, the problem that is occurring in this chart is that they're working at a slow work rate, and the supervisor requests that they work faster. So there's two outcomes that could occur from that. First of all, they could increase their work rate, or they continue with the slow work rate. So you can see the two brackets that come out of there. So then, from a leadership point of view, if they do increase their work rate, there are two things that you can do. You can positively reinforce them, maybe a pay raise or something like that that can increase the likelihood of that behavior happening again. Or you can view it as a way, well, my leader or my boss didn't come down on me because I did something right, and that's a good thing. The more I can avoid my leader, the better. The more I know that I'm doing things the right way. So avoidance learning comes into play there. So if you're a worker who gets nervous when the boss is around, avoidance learning would be, hey, my boss isn't around. That must mean I'm doing things the right way, and I'm going to keep doing things that way. If they continue to work slow, there can be some sort of punishment, like we talked about, that will reduce the likelihood. Or down there at extinction, you withhold raises, merit pay, or praise, and that can go all the way to being fired or released if that action continues of working slow in this scenario. Okay, expectancy theory. We'll look at this for a couple minutes. Let me see what time it is. Okay. So expectancy theory is a theory that suggests that motivation depends on individuals' mental expectations about their ability to perform tasks and receive desired rewards. I know I fall into this trap sometimes where internally, I know I can do better or do more, but I fall into this trap of, well, I've always done things this way, or I know what I can expect if I do things this way. And so I get stuck in the trap of always doing things because I know what to expect because I do them that way. And I don't get motivated to go above and beyond because I don't necessarily know what to expect or don't necessarily need those things in order to accomplish more. And I don't know if any of you have fallen into that before, but all of us to some point try to meet the expectations of what we need to do. But once we've met those, we don't necessarily go above and beyond because of our mental expectations that go into it. So again, we won't look at this real quick. You can look at this closer. Exhibit 8.7, which is on page 241, explains the expectancy theory in a little bit more detail. We won't look at that right now, though. I don't want to spend too much time on that. The equity, oh yeah, there it is. So if you want to look at that, it's on page 241. The equity theory, this is a theory that proposes that people are motivated to seek social equity in the rewards they receive for performance. This is the idea that you're being treated equally or feel some sort of equality with you and those working around you. And some people, this is really important. Maybe they don't need the recognition of being above others, but as long as they feel that they're on the same playing field and level with others, that's all the motivation it takes to stay working hard, is that you feel like you're part of the group or you're receiving the rewards that everyone else is receiving. And that's important to a lot of people. Empowerment is another motivational technique, is basically defined in the textbook as power sharing. And this is where a leader doesn't necessarily give up any of their leadership ability or the leadership qualities, but they allow others to share in the leadership with them and learn how to become a leader in different areas. So you delegate the power to others, and you give authority to subordinates in the organization. How many of you have felt empowered in any position or job that you've had, where you've been given some sort of role or responsibility that gives you more leadership or power? Okay. Hopefully all of you have and continue to reach and fulfill those as well. Okay, real quick on empowerment. I don't want to spend too much time. Okay, yeah, we'll do this. Let me just look here and see. Okay. So when it comes to empowerment, before you begin to empower employees. So if you're in a leadership position and empowerment is one of your goals and you feel like that could be a huge motivating factor for those that work for you, there's a couple factors that you need to have in place before you do that. First of all, employees receive information about company performance. They're aware of how the company is doing and how it's performing. Number two, employees receive knowledge and skills to contribute to company goals. That not only do they recognize the goals, but they know what it's going to take as an individual to reach those goals. Number three, employees have the power to make substantive decisions or substantive decisions. Four, employees understand the meaning and impact of their jobs. And five, employees are rewarded based on company performance. If you have all of those in place, then you're ready to empower those within the organization. Okay. If you want to look at this a little bit more when it comes to empowerment, there's different ways to design jobs, to characteristics of jobs that help empower people, and how to enrich people in empowerment situations. Feel free to take a look at that. I'm going to skip ahead to engagement, okay? And this is similar to empowerment. This is on page 33 of the PowerPoints, if you want to turn there, and then we've skipped ahead a little bit here to page 248 in the textbook if you want to look ahead. But engagement is the idea that when people enjoy their jobs and are satisfied with their work conditions, they contribute enthusiastically to meeting team and organizational goals, and feel a sense of belonging and commitment to the organization. So this is not just working for an organization, doing your job and leaving every day, but this is a feeling that whether you're at the job site, away from the job site, that you represent that job, you represent that company or that business, and that their goals are your goals, and you kind of fuse their ideas and goals into yourself. So I would say that in my role at Carson Newman, I feel like I represent Carson Newman everywhere I go, and that I am engaged in the purpose and the role of Carson Newman anywhere and everywhere I go. So, and I try as much as possible to contribute to the goals of the organization, and I definitely feel a sense of belonging as a professor at Carson Newman. Have any of you worked in a position where you felt like that, where not only were you working for the company, but within and outside of the organization, you felt like you wore it with a sense of pride that you worked for them and you engaged inside and outside because of that? Okay, hopefully all of you at some point do reach a position or work in a company where you feel that you're not just working to work, but you're really part of who you work for, that you enjoy it, and you feel like you have a sense of belonging in that organization. I feel like Carson Newman does that really well with the faculty and staff. It's a real family feel. Hopefully all of you have realized that, or do realize that through the professors and the way we work as well. Okay, real quickly, I think this is the last page of the PowerPoint. So some ideas for motivation. These are just two that were put in at the end of the chapter. First of all, the making progress principle. And this is the idea that the single most important factor that can boost motivation, positive emotions, and perceptions during a workday is making progress toward meaningful goals. So any of you that hopefully are already in a role or a job, this is one way to motivate others, is to always progress toward meaningful goals. And then finally, the thriving workforce idea is that a workforce in which people are not just satisfied and productive, but also engaged in creating a better future for themselves and the organization. This incorporates vitality and learning. And again, I would say, hopefully that you feel that at Carson Newman, that we are striving to always do better. Again, that the Christian principles, not only do we say them, but we act them out as well. And that everyone that you associate with Carson Newman is living up to that identity as well. And so a thriving workforce is part of that. And hopefully all of you experience that as students or in the businesses that you work for as well. Okay, I know we kind of rushed through the last few pages there, but I'm glad we were able to get through it. Just a reminder for Chapter 8. For Chapter 8, the discussion board is actually going to be over discussion question number 2, which is on page 252. The question here, I'll just read it so we're all on the same page. With the economy still in a slump, some companies were freezing pay raises or even cutting pay for some employees so they could offer substantial raises to people considered star performers. As a motivational technique, does this practice seem like a good one to you? And what might be some disadvantages of this technique? Okay, so that's what the discussion board is going to be for Chapter 8. And then the case study for Chapter 8 is on pages 255 and 256. The name of it is Sunspots. And there are 3 questions that go along with that case study for Chapter 8. Are there any questions about the assignments for this week? Again, every week, like I said, I'm trying to make it as the same as possible so that during all this crazy times, we're all on the same page. Again, don't forget about your final leadership paper. Always feel free to ask me questions about that. I will catch up on grading tomorrow. I'll try to get through at least weeks 1 and week 2 so that we can get caught up on that. If you have any late assignments that you haven't turned in yet, or I know that first week was kind of crazy getting your textbooks and stuff, please let me know. I can still give you partial credit. I can't give you full credit, but please let me know if you had any issues, and I'll try to help you out as much as possible. Any questions? All right, well, your discussion board initial posts will be due tomorrow night at midnight, and then the rest of the things are due Sunday at midnight, and then I will see you back here Monday, and we will discuss chapters 9 and 10. Okay, you all have a good night. I'll see you next week. So Ollie, I can stop it now?